Hey everyone, it's Danielle from Exploring Alternatives. In this video, we're going to tour a traditional Icelandic turf house. Turf houses are the original green buildings because they source local materials. Here in Southern Iceland, that means they're using turf from the local wetlands and lava stones. Building thick walls like this insulates the houses against wind and cold weather. And another really interesting thing about them is that they're built to be recycled and reused. So one turf house will last for one generation, and then the next generation will tear it down, install new turf, but reuse all the old stones. So the stones you'll see in these houses have been reused over and over for generations. Most turf houses in Iceland were torn down after World War II when people were encouraged to modernize their homes, which means there's almost no turf houses left. So we're really lucky to be here at this turf house museum in Southern Iceland, and we're going to meet with Hennis, who runs the museum and whose grandparents and great-grandparents used to live and run this farm.
This is definitely the last one that was lived in this area. It was lived in, it was a functioning farm up till 1965 with 10, 12 cows and 70, 80 sheep, and everything was done with horses. There was no tractor used ever. So a typical wall like this, you start with the foundations. A big stone that you dig in partly, and then you build it from there with a layer of turf, another layer of stone, alternating layers of turf and stone, and turf strips, and then you compact the soil behind the stones and turf, and then you just continue that way until it's finished. And if it's properly done with good material, like in this case, then it's very sturdy. Gonna last. This is gonna last for. We would say just one generation, 30 years, 40 years. You would reuse the stones and replace the turf. And you either use turf chunks like this, which is not used in this area that much, too rainy for that in the south of Iceland. But and you cut turf strips. And then you would use these tools for cutting the chunks. You need very sturdy and strong and sturdy tools, like this, for cutting the chunks.
And are you farming the turf, or is the turf just growing naturally here?
It comes from the wetland, not from the field. This is useless. Comes from out there in the wetland. And then you have tools like this for cutting the strips. Then you're on your knee and you cut like this. And you have tools like this of different type and shape for trimming the turf. This also is kind of a scythe for cutting grass, cutting scythe, but still used for cutting turf as well. You would be cutting kind of diagonal cuts like this, and then you are kind of trimming it with knives like this. See, stone like this would be ideal for wall building. You have a flat top and then a flat face.
Okay.
So it's very easy to build a house if you have only stones like this. And then this, the lava has these holes, so it's air bubbles in it. So it is much lighter than it looks.
Oh, okay. Yeah, they look pretty heavy.
Yeah, look heavy, but they are light. Kind of small pieces like this, you're just trimming it. You're not shaping it.
Okay.
You would be using it more or less as it is, but you might be breaking off. Perhaps if this is in the way, then you break it off. But usually you just look for the proper stone. This is the turf. It's cut in the wetland, extremely dense root material, and then you have tools like this for trimming it if necessary. So it's almost like meat or it's all roots. This is the most efficient for compacting the turf like this. And then you compact the soil inside the walls, and then with sticks like this.
Traditional turf houses, and especially turf houses on farms, were built in clusters. So you'll see there's many houses all linked together. Only one of them is actually the living space, where you'll find the beds. And then in the other houses, you would find things like a horse stable or a food processing area. And they did this to take advantage of insulation from shared walls.
The layout of the typical Icelandic turf farm is a cluster of houses. It's a complex of many small houses for different functions. But usually it's only one house which is the living quarter, living house that everybody would live in. Everybody would stay in one house, but then the other houses are for different functions. There's the small house over there is a smithy, the house is there is a barn, and then stable behind, fish drying shed, then different small houses for horses on this farm, kitchen and pantry and workshop for making things, and the house for keeping potatoes and hen house and different things like that. So altogether it would be around 20 houses on this farm, which was average. And then when I was brought up here in the 60s, it was about 8-10 houses in the cluster, in the main cluster.
Inside the main home, you can see that all of the beds were in one room, and this is where everyone did all of their work, where they slept, where they ate, where they gave birth. Everything in an Icelander's life happened in this main living space, and it really was communal living.
This is was called the blue room. Was not used much, only for receiving guests and used in the summertime. But then, if you go further in, this was used for processing milk. And then this room here was a typical kitchen. These kitchens were in use well into the 20th century for boiling things and smoking. And the smoke from the open fire would be used for preserving food. Preserving the meat and fish and other things, and then baking bread and rye bread and flat bread and everything. Everything was done on a fire like this, in a separate room like this called hearth kitchen or hlóðaeldhús in Icelandic. And then this was the way into the stable, which we have not been rebuilding yet.
I didn't realize they were all connected.
All connected with passages.
Yeah. So you didn't have to go outside?
No. You would go into the stable there, which we are in the process of rebuilding now, and then from the stable into the barn. And so this room was in constant use, used every day. But this is the main room. This is the main living room that was just about, well, it would be the same type of room in same proportions, same width, same height, everywhere in Iceland, on every farm. And this is the room that everybody would be living in. You would be sleeping on the beds would be fixed along the walls. 2 people sleeping in each bed. And then, like my great-grandmother, which is over there, she had 9 children in the bed over there. And then she died there when she was 94 or 5 years old. And
in this house?
In this house. This is the room where everything was done. Children would be conceived as well in this room. And then giving birth, and then working and eating and sleeping, and then dying. Everything was done in the same room, and everybody would be sleeping in, sharing the same space. Only privacy basically would be your own bed, and then what you keep under the pillow or something like that. But it is a kind of a communal type of living. And if there are people moving around and you have 5-6 people living in a space like this, and then you heat it up with your body.
Each house is joined together with hallways so that people could go from one area of the house to the other without having to go outside.
It's more economic to do it that way, but the main reason is for insulation and saving heat, keeping the heat inside. Also in maintenance, it's easier to have a small house. You could rebuild one small house in the cluster without disturbing the others. Rather than if you would have one big house, then it would be a major project to take down the big house and rebuild it. But in a cluster of relatively small houses, you would be able to rebuild each part without tearing everything down. And that is what was done in the old turf farms. You would be repairing one house at a time.
Okay. In addition to having really thick walls made of the lava stones and the turf, the houses are also dug and built into the back of a hill so that they're protected from the cold northerly winds.
If you look at these houses from the back, like from this angle, then we see that they are dug into the hill. They are dug into the hillside, not sitting on top of it, but dug into it. So the earth is protecting it from the especially from, in this case, from the north wind, which is the cold and strong wind in the winter and most of the year. And so the main living room called baðstofa at the front is almost completely protected from the elements. So this is a key factor when it comes to the old Icelandic turf houses. They are dug into the land.
Hennis completely restored this old farmstead, and while he continued to use the traditional methods using the turf and the lava stones for the walls, they did use corrugated iron for some of the front walls and some of the newer roofs.
This was practically the only shelter we had when we started rebuilding this, because this was all in ruins. We had to.
And was it you and your wife doing this?
Yes, and my mother. She was born here. She was very enthusiastic about preserving the farm, and so it was a family project to start with, and then my wife and I, we took it over. My mother passed away a few years ago, and then building the museum and all that. We started on that 2006.
It's really incredible to see how cozy and livable these small spaces are, even though they're built with such basic natural materials. One of the reasons that Icelanders ended up using sod layers in their stone houses is because they don't have any lime in the soil that would allow them to create cement so that they could block the holes in between the stones, kind of like what you would see in Scotland or Ireland.
There is no lime in Iceland. It's too young for that. So we have no natural or local cement for cementing the stones together, and we have a very limited supply of wood. There is hardly any local wood. So it either would be imported. It was always imported wood to Iceland on a small scale through the centuries, but most of the wood used in these houses would be from driftwood, and there would be driftwood and shipwrecks. That would be the wood that we would be using, and so it's a limited supply of wood. That is one reason that turf and stone was used on such an extensive scale. Turf and stone was used in every house everywhere in Iceland, and no difference between classes. The so-called upper class, priests or officials, they would also live in turf houses and use turf and stone for the walls. And then the poor people would also use the same material. So there's not a class difference there, because turf and stone was the local material and available almost everywhere in Iceland, and with proper use, like you see in these houses, it is very sturdy and good material. This is when it dries out, becomes almost like a brick, and gives a very good insulation. And if it's properly done with kind of basic skill or the basic knowledge of the craft, then it is very sturdy and beautiful at the same time. I mean, this is beautiful walls.
It blends right into the landscape.
Yes,
And what about dampness? So would this hold a lot of damp if it was
yes,
raining a lot?
yeah. The dampness would have been a problem in these houses always, especially before the corrugated iron, and would have been a problem. But again, if it's properly made, with a very thick layer of turf on the roof, and the roof would be steep. As you see, they're very steep, these roofs. And you see the house over there, which is a typical turf house. It's a very steep roof, a very thick layer of turf. It would have to rain for a long time before the water penetrates all the way through. So there was much less leakage in the houses than you might think. I've been talking to a lot of, systematically talking to old people that lived in these houses, which are disappearing now very quickly, and very few of the people remember that these houses were leaking. It's relatively easy to heat these houses up, and you would use your body heat mostly for heating the houses.
Oh, they didn't have fires in there?
No, never, never open fire in these houses in Iceland.
So just body heat would heat these?
Yes, originally would be body heat. And then latter part of the 19th century and beginning of the 20th century, they started installing stoves, wood burning or coal stoves, either into they would extend the main living room, as they would do in the south, and then would have the stove there, and that would generate some heat. I think it's not easy to say. I could do a better house, a more beautiful house. If I would rebuild it. I think it might be difficult. I mean, should it be higher or lower or wider? I think it's pretty good as it is. Difficult to improve. I would say it's worth preserving as it is, and blends almost completely into the site.
We didn't even see it
No.
when we first got here. Thanks for watching. We hope you enjoyed this video. Give it a thumbs up if you liked it, and subscribe for more videos like it.